Well, welcome. My name's Greg Williams. I'm your host for this evening, and I'm also the director of UMBC's Instructional Systems Development Program. I know we have some alumni and current students out there, yes? Okay, great. Well, this is about, I think, the 11th year we've been doing these events. We started them about 11 years ago, and essentially I think they've worked well. We videotaped them, as you can see from the back. And we always pick out a topic that we think is going to be of interest to the group. Tonight we have a panel that's going to discuss consulting that I'm going to introduce shortly. So, what is this forum? Well, part of the mission of the university is to teach, to do research, and community service. And this probably does some teaching to a certain extent, and it also provides some community service. So, we're happy to put these on for the community at large, and we'll hopefully continue to keep doing these. The program tonight is sponsored by UMBC's Instructional Systems Development Program. And actually, and we'll talk about that, but actually it was the first master's program at UMBC. UMBC is coming up on its 50th anniversary next year. So we're a relatively very young university. Harvard, being founded in 1636, has a couple of years on us, a little bit of a head start, but I think we've done pretty well for being 49 years old. And I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Cook a little bit later, who started the program right after the university started. The person I want to recognize before we go on, Dr. Cook, would you mind standing up? Dr. Cook created the Instructional Systems Development Program here at UMBC. It was the first master's program, and he was far ahead of his time. And I'm not sure if he knows this, but I think he does, that we wouldn't be here tonight if it weren't for him, because he kind of set the tone and set the pace and created the culture. And basically, the culture that he created, where it was a culture for working adults, and people wanted to apply what they learned immediately, and part-time adults going to graduate school. Dr. Cook, those programs are fashionable now, but 50 years ago, they were pretty revolutionary, and he was doing them way back then. So Dr. Cook, thank you very much. A lot of people owe their careers to you. So tonight's topic is consulting, and consulting always seems to be a mysterious thing for some people. I've had people tell me, yeah, I want to be a consultant. Well, why do you want to be a consultant? And they say, more often than not, I want to make a lot of money. And I said, well, you have to know something to be a consultant. They're not going to hire you if you don't know anything. So tonight we're going to talk about consulting, and people always seem to be interested in that. And I'm going to introduce our panel so you can meet them. And I think we have a very good panel. I'll start from the far left with Catherine Zaranis. Catherine, you can raise your hand. Catherine is a performance consultant and instructional designer at her company, PerformLink, whereas she improves quality systems, leadership, and support. She's led design projects for over 100 courses for public and private nonprofits. Catherine's known for her, and I can attest to this, her high energy and down-to-earth approach. She's recognized for expertise in HPI, consulting, leadership, coaching, learning technologies, and more. She actually is an award winner. She won the Dr. Cook Student Award a few years or more back. I forget the exact year. Essentially, she received top honors in the European ISPI Business Conference Simulation and was recognized as a Chapter of Excellence when she was president of the Potomac chapter of the ISPI. So, Catherine, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for
Next to
having me,
her, we can clap. It's okay, we can clap. Next to her is Dr. Stuart Weinstein. Stuart Weinstein has 40 years of experience in private industry, government, corporate, and business consulting at IBM, Unisys, and Booz Allen. He also ran his own consulting business for a number of years. He currently works at Management Concepts in Northern Virginia. He's a Florida State graduate, and I don't think Stu would mind if I said that He was the graduate assistant for Robert Gagne when Dr. Gagne was at Florida State. And Stu told me once, he said, Greg, I've got a lot of great stories about Dr. Gagne, and a few of them are even about education. So Stu, thank you very much for joining us. Then we have Dr. Gabe Hamda. Gabe, thanks for coming tonight. Gabe is the president and CEO of ICAT, I-C-A-T-T, Consulting, which he founded in 1994. ICAT helps organizations improve their organizational performance through training, staffing, and security systems. Gabe has worked with clients in the federal, private, and nonprofit sectors. He has a great deal of experience in strategic direction, client relations, project management, talent management, and leadership coaching. Gabe is also a Florida State graduate.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay. That's okay. We welcome everyone.
Yes.
Are you recruiting for any positions at your company?
Always.
Okay, well, tell the who's looking for a job? Anybody looking for a job? Whoa. We have hands. What are you recruiting for, Gabe?
Instructional designers,
Okay.
training professionals, always.
Okay. All right. Very good. To my immediate right. Oh, you clap. To my immediate right is Dolly Oberoi. Dolly is the founder of C-Squared Technologies. It's a company of about 500 employees, Dolly? Am I getting that? Okay. And I think you're in your 26th year there? Okay. It's one of Washington's fastest growing companies. She is the CEO. She works with a number of organizations also who support entrepreneurs, serves on a number of boards, including George Mason here at UMBC. She's a graduate of Harvard University and the Delhi University School of Economics. Dolly's name often comes up when you talk about entrepreneurship and women in business and small business. She's been featured in many articles and done a number of interviews. Dolly, are you recruiting for any positions?
Absolutely. We are always recruiting, and we have a number of UMBC students working for us, and they're the best. And I don't say that lightly because you do have a lot of competition in this area. So if you're looking for internships or jobs as multimedia developers, instructional designers, project managers, just go to our website and look for the positions that are open. It's www.c2ti.com careers.
Okay. Thank you, Dolly. So here's how the evening is going to work. You will have an opportunity from the get-go, the very beginning, to ask questions. I'm going to circulate through the audience with a wireless mic, and I want you to ask your question into the mic because we're videotaping it, because if you don't, when people see the videotape, that they're not going to hear your question. And I would say anything's fair game, but I would like to start off the group and say, how did you get started in your business, in your consulting business? What circumstances brought you to that?
Are you going in particular order?
You can arm wrestle for it. That's right.
I'll start. I'm probably the newest. So I'm a graduate of the program, and I had been working for entrepreneurial firms most of my career. And I knew I wanted to step out, but I was apprehensive about doing it, taking the risk. And actually, Dr. Gabe Hamda, who's on the panel here, we would bump into each other in the parking lot at events like this. And he knew this. He could tell that I was interested, but I had this hesitation. And he said to me, well, I'll help you. And I said, you're going to help me get started? And he said, yeah. We can meet for tea or coffee. And we started doing that. And we met for a couple weeks on a weekly basis, and he helped me to learn the business side of the startup. And then we went on to win projects together and to work together because we had complementary skills. But no one really does it alone. And a lot of times we're afraid to ask for help. And even when it's coming at us, we're reluctant to stick our hand out and raise our hand and say, yeah, I think I can do this. And it's been really wonderful ever since. So find a good mentor.
Dolly?
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I came 30 years ago from India in search of educational technology, believe it or not. And I came as a tourist with $200 in a backpack. And I told my mother that I was going to bring computers back to India. And she said, well, computers don't grow on trees, and you've never seen one. And I said, well, I'll find one. So I traveled the globe, and $200, remember? That's all I had. So I traveled the globe. I finally landed in the United States. I had a lot of friends in the PhD programs. And I reached Boston, and one of my friends had just landed a job at Tufts, and he asked me, "Hey, do you have an agenda?" And I told him, look, I'm just looking for computers. I want to take them back, connect the kids, first generation of learners, to the rest of the world. And he said, well, that sounds like a real tall order, but funny you should ask. Here's an invitation for a demo at MIT. They're going to show something about computers and education. So I went to that demo, and I said, yep, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to learn about you integrating technology in education. Mind you, this is 1986, 85, 86 time frame. So the day I applied to school. I did not have $25 for my application fee, so I had to go and petition for that because, look, I had already spent $100 of the $200 I had. Now I had only $100. If I gave them $25 and I paid for my GRE and I paid for my TOEFL, I would not make it. So I have to say my entrepreneurial journey started right at that moment, because I had to become really creative about how I was going to even apply for school, much less than pay for it. So I used to go every day and petition to the admissions person. And one day she got so angry with me, she said, go talk to the dean, you're annoying me now. And I said, look. So I talked to the dean, and the dean said, what can I do for you? I said, you need to waive my admission fee, you need to waive my TOEFL, my GRE, And she said, stop. There are some requirements we have to meet, blah, blah, blah. I argued with her, and she said, what do you really want to do? I said, I have a vision. I want to take education back, technology back to my country. I teach very poor children, and they don't know what I teach them. I can't connect them to the world, and I want to connect them. She didn't waive my GRE, but she waived everything else. And I applied, and I got accepted. That was the moment when I always say that was the moment I became an entrepreneur, because I had to fund everything. And then, lo and behold, I get this fancy degree from Harvard, and I can't get a job. And I moved to Washington, and I want to call out Jim Cook. I met him at ISB. I don't know if he remembers me, but I do remember you. So I came to Washington, and somebody said, serve on all the ASTD, ISB, all these boards, and then you'll find. But I couldn't find a job, so I started consulting. So it's very, very easy, but it is also very difficult, and we'll tell you more later. I don't want to steal the thunder from others.
So you took a very passive approach, sounds like.
I've known Dolly since she started her company, when she was planning it, so I really admire everything she's done, because this is really a success story, not only in our field, but also to be a pioneer in the field for starting in the 1986. I went to the University of Miami and got a bachelor's degree in mass communications, and was very interested in the instructional television side rather than the commercial television. So I decided to get a master's degree, which I also did as a faculty member at the University of Miami, and then decided to go to Florida State University to really hone those skills. I graduated in 1981, and I was on my way back from Tallahassee to go back to my job at the University of Miami. The way that they gave you a sabbatical is you could come back within the same time frame as you had worked. So I'd been there 7 years. I had 7 years to return. And in the 2.5, almost 3 years later, I'm returning. I'm driving down from Tallahassee through Orlando and then on to Miami. And a colleague of mine said, we're looking for some folks to be instructional designers within our company. Would you be interested? I said, well, I'm in traveling clothes. I'm in jeans and a sweatshirt and everything. I'm not going to look good. And he said, well, I talked to my boss. She doesn't really care what you look like. She wants to talk with you. So if you've been in Florida, if you lived in Florida, been there, a storm can erupt like in 5 seconds. I mean, all of a sudden, it becomes dark and it starts to rain. Well, I'm in a far parking lot in a large complex, and I knew where I was going, but there was nothing near there. So by the time I got to the door, the rain had opened up. I was totally drenched. And I went in there, and I was hoping they would have electric hair, the hand dryer, so that I would I would look better. So I did that, and I was kind of there, you know. And I did get the job. So the answer is I declined the job with the University of Miami and got a better opportunity with them. So how I got into consulting was I had enough sense to come in out of the rain. So
Gabe?
You know what? As Greg said, I have an article I shared with you. So since everything I've been able to think about is in that article, I don't have to compete for speaking time. Having said that, just one short story I want to tell you is I was a misfit from my job. So I just was ready to be fired. Things were not working out. And I started volunteering and also teaching. So I kind of came alive because I think the volunteer work and teaching kind of got into my passion. So people started to see the skills I got. And then I received a phone call from one of my classmates from Florida State asking if I can do a project for her. So I was able to negotiate and secure a project. And what I did was, for people who know me, I'm lazy. I love delegating work. So one of my colleagues on my day job, his name is David Duckworth, is just really genius. He's good in doing everything. And I said, Dave, I don't want to make this money. Would you like to help me? So Dave was very happy to help me out with the project. Actually, I saw his wife also was very happy because Dave was able to bring him money. So I saw a happy Dave, a happy wife, and a happy client. I said, I'm going to repeat this. So that's kind of how mine began. Thank you.
I forgot to mention this, but if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll circulate around. There are also cards, blank cards on your table, so if you have a question that you'd rather write down for whatever reason, maybe there's some confidential or proprietary things, or you don't want people to see you're asking a particular question, if you want to write it out and then just hold it up, we'll come around and grab them. One of the things that people often ask me, I'm going to pose it to our panel, is what's the career path for consulting? I mean, is there a career path, or is it a serendipitous one, or is there one that you can really define on if you're trying to teach someone or tell someone, well, this is how you do it, this is how you get in the field?
I might start with that. I don't know if it's not just a career path, it's also kind of an attitude. And when your opening remarks is that there's more to it, you have to know something. So the first thing you want to do is get a lot of different kinds of assignments, opportunities. Coming out of the instructional design program, you know a lot about theory, you know about processes and procedures, terminology. Don't use them because people will glaze over. I remember the first time I talked about a behavioral objective, and the person sitting across from me, who's my client, potential client, said, "Are you saying we're misbehaving?" Okay. So what you really need to do is talk in plain language, use your skills, but do it in a way that you're convincing somebody who's not a professional colleague. And don't turn down assignments because you think, oh, that's going to be kind of boring, because you never know when just some of the tips and tricks that you get from those, that builds your career. You've got the foundation, and it's an excellent program. But that's only the start, and then you turn that into something that can be operationalized, and do it just as a colleague to colleague. And that's really been kind of the success I've had in both working for big companies, little companies, and my own company, is just to give them and listen. I mean, be a good listener, and don't come up with your solutions right off the bat. Listen to them and let them articulate what they want. So that's my advice.
So one of my suggestions to everybody, because I applied that this is based on experience, is that when I started out early, you have to be extremely flexible, and you have to be able to know and do a lot of things. So as we just heard, that try to take a lot of different assignments because they give you a lot of different experiences. So I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but that is so critical because each experience teaches you something different, and then you put it all together. Your clients are looking, and you have to convince your clients, you have to talk to them with confidence. But if you don't know anything and you don't know what's going on, you're not going to be able to work with them and guide them. They're looking to you for guidance. So I think that's really important that you read a lot, you network a lot, look at all the trends, tools, technologies, but again, don't lecture them on the latest trend is, you can use an iPhone for drying your hair. Well, sorry, you can't do that. I can't do that in the government because I can't own an iPhone. That's what they're going to tell you. So you have to make sure that you're not talking at them, but working to solve their problems. It's about them. It's not about us as a consultant. That flexibility, listening to them, and also being extremely knowledgeable about what's happening in their agency, what is happening in the world around them, how it impacts them is very critical in helping them in developing solutions for the customers.
I'll go next. So I think that I've heard consulting described in a few ways. I've had a client describe it as a support. We ask you because we need somebody to lean on, right? So seeing yourself as a servant leader and as a consultant, you're there to support your client. And just as Dolly said, it's not about you, it's in supporting your clients to be successful. I have also heard others describe consulting as brute force and improvisation. So it's one of those things where when you come in, you don't have all the pieces. The technologies may not all be working. The plan may not be there. And so you are coming in to pull that together. And it's not always pretty, So on the academic side, you can, make it a bit more elegant. But then when you enter the workforce, you're engaging with human beings and trying to solve problems. So that's where you're learning to be agile. And the other thing is, in today's workforce, it's not really a ladder, it's more of a lattice. So the idea of having projects, sometimes you feel like you're moving forward, sometimes you're moving sideways. Sometimes as you're learning a new competence that you're going to offer to clients, you may be moving backwards for a period of time in order to be able to go forward. But if you see that you're forming the whole thing, then you're not sort of it's sometimes hard when you may be working on something that doesn't feel very meaningful. But you can appreciate that it's a skill that you're going to use later, as Dolly had said. The most important, and this was something that I learned early in my career, and this is when I was applying for the Peace Corps in the 90s, I was told, don't pick a task or a job that you think is going to position you for the next thing, right? Because the first time things aren't going well, you're not going to have passion. Pick something that's going to be fun and that you think you're going to be able to do and be successful, rather than something that you think is going to help you with your next big move. So if you're happy and you're productive, then success will come. So finding things that bring you joy and that you can do well and master will sustain you during those difficult times when you're using brute force and improvisation.
One I would just add is, I was just talking to some of the people before we started. In my opinion, the question is on career path, the best career path to be a consultant. In my opinion, people with different varying backgrounds, varying expertise, tend to do better, because just as my colleagues spoke, the clients you deal with would have different backgrounds. So you relate to them if you have varied exposure or varied background, as opposed to someone who just came from a narrow discipline. So in the absence of measuring in 7 fields, one of the things I do is, going to ISPI or ATD, places like that is a natural place for me. But I go to places where I don't understand half of what they are saying. It's just be in the mix. Maybe I get few things they say. So just being in the mix of people you have nothing in common with kind of helps you to kind of listen for something odd. Let me tell you one unsuccess story. Early on, I used to work for one of my professors. And so we used to be taken on these consulting gigs. And I didn't know what hit me. One day, one of the professors called me on a side and said, Gabe, you are uninvited from this consulting engagement. And, English kind of doesn't come easy to me, and I didn't know what it meant. I said, you are no longer on this project. And basically what I did was, in a classroom, you are considered smart by asking a bunch of questions. And so on this consulting engagement, I was just asking a bunch of questions which were not going with where the client was going. So I was kicked out of that consulting gig. And quite frankly, many years later, we had a reunion with that group. And I went to that professor and said, you know what? Thank you. His name is Dr. Stakinas. I said, Dr. Stakinas, thank you so much for conveying that information to me. So, just kind of, he really helped me to kind of listen to a client better rather than just firing them with questions. So, thank you.
Questions from the crowd? You've been quiet.
Thank you. So, Gabe, thanks for. Am I audible? Okay, you can hear me. I can hear myself fine. So, thanks for your comment there about one of your bad experiences that turned great.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear from the rest of you too, in terms of an experience that may not have gone so well, and then you learned a lesson. So, lessons learned.
So I was going to share this with you, but I'm so glad you asked the question. Because as a consultant, it's very important that you partner with your client. And partnership doesn't come easy. Catherine and I just had this conversation before the panel that despite your best efforts, sometimes you're not going to be able to partner with your client. But you have to try to establish trust, because if there's no trust, there's no relationship. So I'll give you a really good example where your integrity is very important. There was a situation where we did a level 3 and level 4 evaluation on the efficacy of using video teletraining versus classroom instruction, in-person classroom instruction. And the results were very similar, but not outstanding in favor of video teletraining. So we did the presentation, we did all of that. The SCS invited us back a couple weeks later, and she said, I don't like the results. I said, ma'am, what would you like to do? She said, I want you to change the results. And my colleague started crying immediately. And I'm sitting here. This is early in my career. I was in my 20s, and I was like, she's the American. She's twice as old as I am, so twice as experienced. She's sitting here and crying. Of course, we're not going to do this. So I had to take charge, because I owned the company, and everybody was older to me for a good 10, 15 years, because I started so young. And I just said to the lady, I said, ma'am, we have interviewed and surveyed over 5,000 personnel in your agency. These are the results. If you think that the data is flawed, we can run it again for you. And we have given you electronic versions of all the materials. And if you wish to do a different presentation, I didn't say you change it. I didn't accuse her. I just said if you wish to present the content, the findings of this report differently, you're welcome to do that, because you have all the data. Would you like us to redo this activity, or would you like to? She threatened me. She said, the unions won't accept this, my bosses won't, I won't get the funding, blah, 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 and I'm going to make sure you never work at this agency ever again. Yes, ma'am, never worked with her ever again. And this was a startup company. I did not have 20 projects or 20 people. It was a startup firm. And I came back and people said, you have to be careful, because if you keep giving up projects like this, you won't have a company. I said, if I sell myself out, I won't have a company either. So that's really important. Your integrity will be tested at every level, and you have to stand tall as a consultant, and don't be rude, but politely you have to get out of that situation if you're put in that situation.
To answer your question, and not with a specific example of a specific, and actually, by the way, I've been in that same boat, and I've been told these are the results, and I've done the same thing. Just said, you just walk away from it. It wasn't my own company, but it was important because I was in charge of the instructional design area. But what you need to do is start amassing some responses to the kinds of questions you'll get, such as, why do we need to do an analysis? I've been working here for 15 years. How long will it take you to go through and figure out what we need to do? And, say, as an example, I would say, well, about 3 weeks, because, looking at the size of the population as well as what the intensity of the need was. And they'll say, well, you couldn't possibly do it in 3 weeks if I've been here all these years. And I have a lot of analogies that I've been building through the years. And one of them is, do you go to the doctor? Well, of course I go to the doctor. When you go into the doctor and you have a pain or something wrong with you, he or she can usually give you a response, or at least a tentative response, if not a final one, in about 30 minutes. Now, do they have to live with the pain, observe you for 10 years before they can give you that diagnosis? And the answer is, we, just like the doctors, are trained to hear and to see and to ask the right kind of questions. And that usually diffuses them, because what they want to do is they want to do it on the cheap. We don't need to do analysis. You don't need to do that, and you don't need to do evaluation, because we can figure out if it's working. So we just want to do the middle part of that. Sometimes you have to do that. But the whole idea is, if they don't get the whole package, they don't get the whole result. And that's something you need. And as you build up these experiences, you need to have a comeback. And I do it politely, by the way. It sounded like it was really curt. But they do understand. And use an analogy has nothing to do with the content area you're talking about, because then they'll get into a discussion about the accuracy of what you're saying. You say about a doctor, and maybe they're talking about jet airplanes. So don't talk about jet airplanes as an analogy. Use something that's just common. That goes with my plain language idea. Oops, excuse me.
Oh, Gabe started this. It's funny, as a consultant, I feel like I'm failing and succeeding every day, because especially when you're on a design project and you're prototyping, you're trying to figure out where you failed to make improvements. And so you have to feel comfortable. I mean, that's the learner mindset. And when I go to sleep at night, I try to be sure as a business owner that the integrity that I have as my identity matches the image that the public has. And if there's incongruence, then like the opportunity that Dolly said, I know I need to walk away. And in my first year, Gabe said the same thing to me. He said, are you firing your clients? And I said, I don't think it's a partnership. Like, this is not, I'm not going to be able to build sustainable solutions for folks if I don't feel like there's a partnership. And in one such instance, I had a client who really loved, usually you can't get SMEs to give you time. I had the opposite problem on one project. I had 8 SMEs that loved getting together and sharing their expertise. And I can tell you, when you do 54 versions of one particular model, you wind up where you started. And so, but you have to dissect it. And so I remember thinking to myself, I need to get off this, right? Because these gentlemen enjoy hearing each other's expertise, and I'm never going to be able to produce what it is that I need. And I didn't think that that was going to change in the culture, so I just, politely, excused myself. And the client, it was one of those things where they were not upset with me. I worked with another colleague from UMBC. I'd never found myself in a situation like this, and I just sort of found the language in an appreciative way to basically, demonstrate that it wasn't a match. I wasn't angry. It was just, this isn't going to change, and I have to decide if I can accept this or if I have to step away. And I did it a few times that year. And in my second year of business, I was so happy, because the clients that I had chosen to continue to work with, there was a true partnership, and we were able to do really great work together. But it was hard. I mean, that first year, you just wanted to be able to say yes to everyone, but it was just having the courage and the belief that you would be able to find meaningful work and good relationships to work in.
Looking back on let's say your first 5 years in your business, what would you have spent more time doing, and what would you have spent less time doing?
The first 5 years. So, I think this may be a matter of style. My approach, let me kind of take you back. The way I look at the word consulting practice, what it means to me is kind of more like a solo gig. You are someone like Oprah, you're a famous person. I'm blessing her, by the way. I just love the woman. So, although I will watch, why not? So, to me, that's consulting. When, you provide advice, you are the name, you are the brand, you are the product. And that's not my approach. we didn't tell any personal stories. I have 21 brothers and sisters. I come from a big family. So I love people. So, I love just building a clan. So my approach is, I spend most of my time with people, helping them, developing them so that we can succeed as a team. So that just happened to be my approach, working with the people. This came in handy. I was working with a client early on, one of the state of Florida accounts, and it just got a little rough, like just the way my colleagues described. Well, I think that approach really came in handy. So I didn't have to be the one to do the fighting all the time. So I have one of my colleagues, her name is Tanya Kruk. She still works with us. She's a Navy wife. And I said, Tanya, do you mind just working with this client? So everything was peaceful. So if I don't work out, she worked it out. So I spent a lot of time working with my colleagues, building them up and see what they are made up of. And if I fail, we succeed because of the other person. So that's kind of where I spend most of my time. And the second area is building relationships. Some clients, they don't want you to build a relationship, kind of like transactional. Get the job done, get out of the way. I needed to learn that. Everyone is not going to be your friend. So it took me a while to kind of catch up with that. To the extent that's possible, getting to know them and such really helped. So that's the second area. So what's an area where I spent the least amount of time based on my approach? I spent the least amount of time doing the work. So, I guess enough said. Because I'm surrounded by very smart people who can do the work, so I can rely on them on the work, just work on taking care of the people, the customers. And so that's kind of the way my first 5 years went, my next 5 years went, and the latter 5 years. So that's kind of been my life.
I would change just a little bit. I don't think I would change a whole lot, because just like Gabe, I'm a people person. I love people. I like to work with them. And I think that's a very important core competency a consultant needs to have, because if you're introverted, it's kind of challenging, because as Catherine said, you can spend days with SMEs, a group of people who really enjoy themselves, and everybody, and you become a part of that family or group. So the first 5 years I spent building the company one client at a time. I decided I was going to work with only one client, 2 clients. So FEMA was my first client in 1989. I spent every waking moment and sleeping moment on that campus. And I had the good fortune of winning a very interesting project, which was to take them, to help them develop the enterprise-wide learning strategy before it was in style. So how to take them from the chalkboard to the electronic learning environment and analyze some of their sample courses, build prototypes, train their entire academy staff. So think about it. I mean, I got to know every single person on that campus. So guess what? Now they wanted me to do the work. They said, well, that was nice that you taught us how to do it. Who's going to do the work? So I spent too much time doing the work. I was building relationships and all that stuff, but I was doing the pilot. I was doing the instructional design. I was the project manager, the dishwasher, the bottle washer, whatever. And that's what I had to change 5 years later. My husband gave me the keys to a new office in Chevy Chase and said, first, you need to get out of the house. Second, you need to hire a couple people, and your business will grow, and it really did.
One of the things you need to do is understand that the instructional design and all its related fields is a business. Oftentimes you come out of, regardless of what your role is, if you have your own company, you're going to run it like a business. So I spent the first 5 years of my career learning about the business side of it. I knew instructional design. I knew how to write. I was a TV director before I was an instructional designer, so I knew that as well. But you almost fall flat on your face if you don't understand the business of it. Dr. Williams is running a business because he has a budget, he has staff, he has personnel, he has facilities, et cetera, that he's responsible for. So learn that as well. You don't have to get an MBA, but you really do need to understand how it all fits together so you can be successful, give good pricing, good estimates on how long it's going to take. There are a lot of studies that give you that information. I also had a 4-person company when I started, and the other thing is we were selling hardware and software. It was an interactive video disc. That's how long ago it was. And we're only 4 people, and we really didn't have a robust company. So when somebody called for the shipping department, which we didn't have, you also have to know how to change your voice. And you say, I'd like to talk with the shipping department. I'm in the office all by myself, and they say, 1 moment, please. Shipping department. And that's kind of, so basically you have to be able to be a good actor.
How do I follow that? All right. I would do more of, this is one thing that I discovered early in my career, but was reminded of it later, was volunteering. So I had started my career as a volunteer, and I met my husband. I remember the Peace Corps director had said at our staging, look to your right, look to your left. Don't be surprised if your next, husband or wife is in the room. I thought, in the room? I'm 21 years old, And he said, when people are volunteering, a very beautiful side is revealed. And so often people fall in love. Well, the same thing happens professionally. When you are giving of yourself and folks are able to see your skills, that's when your best self is being put forward. And when my colleague had nominated me to be president of ISPI when I was working full-time and still in the program here at UMBC, I thought, how am I going to do this? But I accepted it, and it was the greatest opportunity. When I started off my business, I've shared with Dr. Williams, 2/3 of all of my opportunities came from leads that came to me through my volunteer years at ISPI, because when folks would be in situations that they were looking to solve, I had been solving those problems for the association, and the members were all viewing that. And so when they were challenged with those same situations professionally, they had already they'd observed me solving those problems and called me. So volunteering, I would do more of. And just enriches your life both personally and professionally. And I guess less of is worry. I think for me, trying to get it perfect all the time so that it meets, the standards, just feeling comfortable with, it being, just good enough sometimes, because sometimes, just getting it to work and not, spending the discretionary time. So worrying less and being comfortable and confident in what I'm putting out there for folks, that's what I would do less of.
We have a question from the back.
Hi, good evening. I have a question. I've actually been working for a consulting firm for about a year and a half now. And prior to that, I had considered going into business for myself. But one of my concerns, and I don't know if any of you have had that concern, is I'm very passionate as an instructional designer. I enjoy it very much. That's why it's my profession. That's why I seek it out. And, one of my fears is that I'm going to get caught up in that business side and that, I won't be able to do what I really like to do. So how have you handled that?
I don't think that precludes you from doing that, because I did the very same thing. If you really feel that you don't want to do the business side of it, and by the way, that one of the 4 people there did do the business side. So I was doing instructional design and consulting. You have to make that choice, but I'm not saying you have to do it. You have to know it, because if actually the person who's working with us also was a CPA, so they understood, and that you're really looking at the cost side rather than the investment side in that particular scenario. But not understanding what, more than profit and loss, but what cash flow is and how to determine what is the price point, how long is it going to take, and one of the reasons I'm not in business, we survived for about 6 years, is that my partner in the business loved to do programming. That's it. And so when we had to make business decisions, he loved to do the programming. And so that was kind of our fait accompli, because of the fact that he couldn't really focus on the business. And you got to do that. You can't just work, charge them a certain amount of money and then give them, 5 times more labor, because even though you own it, you still have to think you're billable. Otherwise, you're giving it away, because you're actually giving up income you could have had if you weren't so enthusiastic. So that was it. So I just know it. You don't have to actually be the person.
And the way to do it is either to decide the business part that you don't mind doing and doing it and outsourcing a piece, or if you are able to find somebody who really enjoys the business side, partnering with you in that way. And I've done it both ways, where I've outsourced and where I've partnered. So, you know, you can either outsource it, but be clear about what you're doing, or find somebody who likes to do that piece.
Actually, maybe to kind of tag on that, oftentimes in this business, people team together. I mean, the company that I work for actually teams with Dolly's company. So you don't have to have it all in one place. And if you're a subcontractor to another company, they may handle more of that business function. And then basically you're billing them for time and services.
So in my case, I was also very passionate about the discipline and hated the business side of it. So when the business started growing, I hired my husband because he loved operations. He was at a big company, GDIT, was a VP, whatever. And I said, man, if you don't join the business, I'm going to have to hire somebody, and I won't even know what the person's going to do. And I don't even like that part. He said, well, do I have to work for my wife? I said, well, no, you can be your own person. You do the business side, and I'll do the strategy and marketing and business development side. So it has worked for a very long time. He joined me in '97. So and we trust each other. I just tell him, hey, I think this customer is this way, and this is what the pricing should be around this much, blah, 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 because he may not always have that information about the customers. So I think it's, as everybody has said, it's best to have people who complement you. You should know about the business, but you can't do it all, especially if you start growing.
We have a question here.
Hi. Can you share a little more information about how you determined your fees when you first got started? How do you determine your fees? How do you know what to charge?
You know, this may not be the most scientific way, but I'll share it. One of the things I love doing is to ask for a budget they have. I'll give you one example. I think it's not in the area. So since we are on video, so I hope I'm not putting anybody on the spot, especially Oprah. It's end of year. I kind of knew it's end of year, and I asked, what kind of money are we trying to spend here? Well, the person revealed how much. Actually, this is outside the Beltway. By the way, when we say Florida is a sunshine state, it's a place where people tell you everything. That's kind of the rules are. So I was made aware of the budget, and so we just develop solutions around that. So I kind of tend to navigate toward that. So others will fill in the scientific way. So mine is just ask for a budget and work within the budget.
Well, if you're working with the government, they don't want to divulge that information. So the way we price our projects is based on, of course, customer knowledge, because are they going to be very stingy? Do they know? FEMA never has money, so let's get that on the table. So we do work for them, and people in my company are always screaming, you want us to hit target profit, but you work for FEMA. I said, we pay them for the privilege of working for them. So, because I believe in their mission, and it is a labor of love for us, because it makes difference between life and death, every solution that we develop. So, but in that case, let's not take that example. But generally, we look at rules of thumb, industry standards, because there are standard pricing for, say, 1 hour of e-learning, or 1 hour or 1 day of instructor-led training or webinar, whatever you're doing. There are rules of thumb, and there are variations based on customer knowledge, whether it's a revision, whether it's a new, whether they've got content. So there are a number of variables. So that's what we take into consideration when we are doing the pricing. So it's not that scientific, it's just a little bit of science and a little bit of art and a little bit of intel from the client that gets you the price.
There are some studies and you have to be kind of cautious. You have to look at what the study's basis are. But Brian Chapman has produced several of these studies. They're copyright-free, so you can, all he asks you to do is to attribute it to him. If you cite it, if you're using it, just put the information in that it came from him. But the most recent studies were done in 2010, 2013. I think they're still valid in terms of what Dolly was just saying about how long it takes, industry standards for e-learning, and there's different levels of e-learning depending on the complexity, same with classroom instruction. So you might want to Google that and you can get that information. What you want to do is don't use the pricing he has in there, because what he has is an average of averages. So put in the pricing for the instructional designers that you're offering and the project managers and all those types of folks. But it's based, and I'm just trying to, off the top of my head, I used to know all those numbers, but it's based on over 3,000 organizations and about 1.8 million hours of training. So it has validity. Normally what people do when they're pricing within a company, I don't know how it is within the other companies, but they run around the office and say, how long did it take? And then they multiply it out. Well, that's not really bad, because that is your target population. And to Dolly's point, you have to know what the capabilities of your own people are, as well as the capabilities of your client and how much they're going to provide. By the way, also, to talk about what kind of a family we have here, Gabe's company is a subcontractor to us for a large contract. And that is, he has some specialized capabilities that he offers us, and rather than us having to go out and hire people to fill those capabilities, it might be a 2-year contract, and of course he gets the business, and we don't have to worry about, will we get another client who wants the same things. So that's another piece of what you need to do when you're doing the business side of it and the management. But there are also, if you belong to ATD and a lot of the other associations, they also have studies. But know what the studies say. Don't just take the numbers. And if they fit what you want and you can use them, then I would go with that, because it becomes credibility. When you do a proposal and they say, where'd you get the numbers from? It's so much better to say, I got it from a national study that involved 3,000 companies, rather than we ran around the office.
So before I let Catherine say something, I want to just make one point. If you work with the government, it's a whole different ballgame. Low price, technically acceptable wins, period. It does study, science, art, nothing works. You're the lowest bidder, you win it. And how are people pricing that? Only Lord knows, because you don't know what the lowest threshold is going to be. So that's where market intel comes in. What are people charging? You have to second guess everything. The other thing is that a sea change has taken place in the last 10 to 15 years. E-learning, learning as a whole has become a commodity, period. People in China are doing it, Taiwan, Malaysia, wherever. Everywhere in the world, they're doing it for a nickel. So that's why it's very difficult to price, because you don't know which company is doing offshoring that work. So while we want, and your wages are based on US, right? Cost of living and all that stuff. Those people are using people in the Philippines at 100th the cost of an instructional designer here. So it's become very, very tricky these days to give pricing to the customers. That's why customer knowledge is very important. Asking the budget, if you can, is very important, because you could be way off or way over or way under, and you don't know what the thresholds are.
So I use all of these methods, and when I first got started, I was using, the industry studies. And as you develop relationships, that's why the partnership is really key, because folks will usually tell you, this time our budget is tight, or I had somebody tell me most recently, like, I have a budget and I want to spend it with you. So it was really, I'd never heard that before, and I didn't even know what to do with it, right? So it's, there's definitely an art and science to it. If you're just getting started, it's way better to come in as a subcontractor, because the prime is going to have their rate set, and then it's a matter of negotiating what's fair and acceptable for them to administer the contract on your behalf. And that way you can get a sense for, what your area of specialty is, and, you can begin to price it on your own, as Dolly is describing. So as you're getting started, demystifying it and working with the prime who's worked that out. And then as you begin to either develop expertise in an industry, and then you have friends. I mean, people will often ask me, what's an acceptable fee for this? And I'll say, is this a federal client? Is it a corporate client? Is it a nonprofit? Because you're going to have different pricing for those different sectors. And then are you looking for somebody with so many years of experience and a degree, right? So that comes into the equation as well. So it's knowing what you're bringing and knowing what the market will bear. And certainly, ask people, talk to people. So when getting started, I definitely think, working with the prime is a good way to go.
Okay, I've got a few questions backed up. We'll start here and then there, there, and there.
Good night, everyone. I wanted to ask, just being an ISD student and not really working in the field right now, having training experience but never actually applying ADDIE or any other kind of ISD model in my work, how would you, and I know, Catherine, you spoke to volunteering and networking. How would you transition, or how would you suggest, I guess from the other panelists, how would you suggest transitioning from a non-ISD career into ISD, especially if you want to consult? So that's my angle.
So are you suggesting if you are graduating from this program, how do you make that happen? So I love that scenario because in my own company, I invite those kind of people to be interns. I always encourage people, look, we have a paid internship. Try, because it's a very safe environment. If you mess up, nobody's going to be mad at you. And if you don't like the situation, you can move on. And also, I think it's important to understand, do you like a small company? Do you like a mid-sized company? Do you like a large company? Do you want government business, private sector, nonprofit? It gives you so many options to make those early decisions. Not that you have to stick to those decisions for the rest of your life, but as you're transitioning, the transition is less bumpy. Because if you go into a job and you don't know what you're doing, which is going to happen, and then you start talking about, Bloom's taxonomy, everybody's going to leave the room. You don't want that to happen. So I always recommend, and I always hire people straight out of school, and I always suggest to them, at least for 90 days, be an intern, because they always, oh, no, really, I'm looking for a job. You won't believe it. Within the first month, either they're on board as a full-time or they're out the door, because, for whatever reason. So we know it in 4 weeks or less that this person is really sharp, will get it together, and will have a job. Otherwise, and then that person knows, well, I really don't like a 4-person company or a 20-person company. I want to do this. So they know as well. So it's a very safe bet is to do an internship.
We have a question here.
Early in my IT career, I had a brief position helping a brick and mortar company who were in the adult industry create a web presence. And this past weekend, I was contacted by a company who wants to, a medical company in Maryland who wants to create, to expand into medical marijuana. And I was wondering if there are any career choices that potentially could be damaging in the long run.
Career choices? Whoa, that is career choices that could be damaging. I didn't hear that.
If you've consumed marijuana? Trying to understand the question.
Later, you had to kind of drop off your resume just because it was not. If you go into government work and they see that you perhaps again work.
I don't think that's really going to curtail it. In fact, the first television programs I produced were for a school of mortuary science, and I thought, what are people going to think? But it's just a program. It wasn't the content they were dwelling on. It's the fact that I created a series of television programs. So I don't think I don't know, I don't see a detriment.
I don't see that. I mean, people are, especially we hire people, even right now there are about 25 open positions. We are looking at the skill sets and the experience. We don't pay attention to the content. Now, there may be interesting content that we are interested in, say somebody's worked on Affordable Care Act and we have a contract like that. That's very interesting to us. But other than that, we really look at the skill sets and the experience.
Okay, another question right up front here.
My question has been partially answered already by Catherine, but I wanted to dig deeper, and that is, as far as getting business, in addition to volunteering, how do you go about getting that, and how much percentage of your time is spent networking in order to get that versus doing actual work? I'm thinking if I spend 40% of my time networking, let's say, how am I going to get the work done, and how am I going to make the money?
Well, for me, the activities all feed each other, right? So the volunteering, speaking, writing, blogging, the activities that are able to demonstrate your expertise, right? And many times, the things that you're writing about or speaking about are the things that you're passionately working about. And when you're writing it, it just elevates your craft. And so I don't see it as an extra thing. It's just part of what I do. It's just, some of it is paid and some of it is unpaid, right? And so the unpaid stuff, it can be marketing, or it's the learning and development that I have. So for me, it's just feeling comfortable putting yourself out there. A lot of folks, you should feel comfortable saying, I'm interested in this, or I'm looking for this, right? And the opportunities, people want to say yes. So it's just having the courage to say, I can offer this service, or I can do this for you. But if you're contributing to the space, right? The opportunities. I've been operating in business for 3 years, and I don't have a website, right? And because my first year, I had more work. I had to subcontract to 14 different people without a website. So it's one of those things where I believe if you're contributing to the profession and you're open, right? My first year, I was afraid to say yes to things, but I just said, okay, I'm going to learn from this. So it's just casting your net and doing a variety of different things that are around your expertise. I got certified this year in something pretty comical, something called laughing yoga. And so I will kick off conferences with laughter activities, and the next thing that I'd like to do is a TED Talk video on laughing yoga. And so, so it's just putting it out there, and then the opportunities. And it wasn't, I didn't consciously say, oh, I'm gonna go market this. It's just who I am. And so I just, put it out there in different ways.
A little bit of a commercial, too. Dr. Williams and I co-authored an article on internships for Talent Management Magazine, and I believe it was about 3 years ago. I'm trying to remember what the date was on it, but if you Google Talent Management Magazine, which is part of a larger corporation of HCM Media, there is some discussion on internship. The one thing, and I don't know how it's handled in various companies, but there are IRS regulations on what you can do in terms of paid and unpaid. So you need to be cognizant of that, both yourself as an applicant for the internship, but also as a company from the liability. You don't want to get cited if you are in your area, you are going to be the person who interviews the interns and approves it, because what it is, the short story is that it substantially contributes to the business, and not in lieu of somebody else, but if it does, then it's required by federal law that you have to compensate them. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it has to be within regs. Just keep that in mind.
I do this, I have a degree in instructional design, but I would say I spend 100% of my time networking. And I'm just happy to say it. And let me just add one thing. I happen to be raised as a son of a farmer. And being a son of a farmer, there is a seeding season and there is a harvest season. So I'm just wired in my head. So I used to go to these functions, Chamber of Commerce, whatever it is, and I have business colleagues who say, what did you get out of it? And I say, wrong question. Because the day you go is not the day you get business. So, there is a time when you're just, like Catherine said it all. There is a time when you are just putting, depositing in the people and meeting them, and next time they become a client. I'll just leave you on one, maybe a couple of people in my life. So one gentleman, 12 years ago, he came and worked for us as a contractor for 4 months, and the contract ended and he went away. And next thing you know, within 4 years, he became our client, okay? Also, 10 years ago, we had a client, a good client, and then, many years later, she became one of our contractors. So it's kind of like, my experience is you just invest in people regardless of where they are. They may be an intern, they may be in between jobs. So, my favorite people I talk to are people who are in between jobs. They may not be the big client. So I think that's, in my view, to just go, oh, this is Mr. Big Client, and this person is looking for work and doesn't have anything. So I just network with anybody. If it's a human being, if they walk, I'm talking to them. You never know.
It's right.
Okay.
So I think there are a couple of aspects to this. If you're a consultant, you're by yourself, obviously that's a very valid question. What do I do? Well, you work 24/7, period. So, I was a consultant for several years by myself, and then I would get a couple other consultants to help me with the peaks and valleys of business. But I used to say all the time, by day I do the work, by night I write proposals and network. And I have to be honest with you, there is no substitute for networking, and networking nowadays is not necessarily only face-to-face, which is really important. Unless you press somebody's palm, they're never going to remember you. But LinkedIn is a very good avenue for you to advertise yourself, network, and contribute to a blog, have your own personal, because the biggest thing is that these days you have to develop your personal brand. If you're not branded, then people are not paying attention to you. But if they say that, and I try to write put up one post or 2 posts on LinkedIn a couple times a month. I do that. I write a blog. I do that. I get a lot of feedback from my clients. So just think about it. I have 3,500 people in my network on LinkedIn. Just by the click of a button, the information goes to 3,500 people, and they include my clients or potential clients. So I think it's a balance. You have to figure out what is the best way for you, because at company it's totally different. You have to develop a different marketing strategy and also depends on whether you're doing government work. You can be a sub to somebody. You can write a micro purchase proposal yourself. Those things you can be trolling for as well.
We have a few questions from the front table here.
Good evening, everybody. My question is, when do you realize that tipping point? Let's say that you love what you're doing, you get into consulting as a solo practitioner. At what point do you realize this is just too much for me? I've got to get into a partnership, or I've got to pull some people into my team. I think from what I've heard, some of you might have started just realizing you're going to pull people in and kind of start off with more people than just yourself. But where's kind of that balance, or where's that point where you realize I really can't handle this myself and I've got to pull people in, or I've got to subcontract this work out? Kind of what goes into that decision making?
I'll give you a very short answer, even though I'm very long-winded. But the tipping point is the day you can't do the job and your quality is deteriorating and you can't service your customer. That's the day you want to say, man, I'm not going to try to do this by myself. I'm going to pull some other people in.
Well, I have, I guess, 2 questions. It seems like most of you all of you on the panel mostly deal with external consulting. So you have your own business and you're consulting with other companies. But what about those persons who deal internally and have to consult internally? So what advice would you give to them on how to be a successful consultant on an internal company or corporate basis? So that was the first part. And then secondly, I'm not really sure, based on what you guys have shared, like what your business breakdown is. I'm not sure if I understand, like, are you only dealing with government versus private? And so I guess if you can share that out a little bit. And also, what kind of services are you guys providing? Is it more technical? Like, are you doing more systems, like how to work a system, how to work equipment? Are you doing more professional development, maybe manager or leadership training? So I'd like to know a little bit more about your businesses. So that's a 2-part question. Thanks.
I don't mind, kind of trying to answer that. Just to begin with the internal consultant. Once upon a time, I was an internal consultant. And just like the first one, I got fired. And I loved it. Here is a story. We are internal consultants, and I was assigned to a team. And I was working with that team. And I thought I was doing a great job because on behalf of that team, I would go to the our executives' offices and get things done and happen. But I didn't know what hit me. One day, my boss, who just became my boss, and we're colleagues, and we're not even on speaking terms, and she became my boss, and she had to tell me, I'm no longer on this team. So the minute she gave me the feedback, our relationship just took another level. So when I heard that team did not want to have me working with them, and I said, Jeanette, the only thing I would ask is, if there is any improvement I can make, I'll be happy to make that improvement. And all of a sudden, she and I became the best of buddies, and she put me on the best project. So, I think what I would say is there is no difference. It's kind of like really kind of paying attention. Like on internal consulting gig, you may think like, oh, I got them, like I don't have to sell. Still the same principles apply. So I never asked for feedback. I was just going at, I thought I knew what they needed, and I went at it. And to this day, I have no idea why I was let go, other than the fact things change. Now on the breakdown, our company started out in the state of Florida, and my experience is, where you do business is where you have relationships. So I went to school in Tallahassee, and a whole bunch of my classmates worked for the state of Florida, for the state government, and I did zero marketing because I was not the best in what I did, but I'm the guy they knew. And guess what? This company I used to work for before I became, a full-time consultant, I was not the best employee. I'm here to tell you, I'm not the best employee, but they are my best clients now. So my point is, the people go a long way. So since I used to work, was in the state of Florida, for the first 7 years, we did a whole lot of state of Florida projects. And then I lived in the city of Jacksonville. It took time, like that farmer's son kind of stuff. In the second 7 years, all our projects came from the city of Jacksonville, everywhere. Because just in a place where people know you, they'll just call on you. I think Catherine said it, you volunteer in the community, you are in ATD, you are everywhere, they see you. The person they know is the person they hire. So that's a little bit of my story.
Right. Half of my career was internal. I mean, we weren't differentiating there. I don't see a big difference because treat your internal clients like clients. Not assuming they know, not buddy-buddy, like, oh yeah, they know what it is. But you're formal to the extent that you need to be formal, but be businesslike and also be prepared and treat them with respect as if, because they are your funding source. So that's basically, it's really not that much different. It may be being internal, now that's one part of the consulting. The other part is if you're internal, they don't believe you. So what they want to do is go hire somebody on the outside to hear the same thing you just said, pay them more money, and then that justifies you. I mean, that may seem funny, but I was with a company, and I decided to go into my own business, and the very same things I was saying internally, they didn't accept, at face value. As soon as I became a consultant, and by the way, my boss gave me, when I left there, gave me my first contract to come back and do the same thing I just did at a higher price, and they go, whoa, this is really good. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, well, I've really hit a gold mine there. This is true. I mean, you'll hear this from almost anybody who's gone from one company to another. Also, the other thing too, sleep is not billable. I want to answer Lenz's question. Sleep is not billable. The turning point is when you want to go to sleep. Okay, because what Dolly's saying, that was my life. Doing things in the day and the evening, and all of a sudden I get 3 hours worth of sleep because I had to be at a conference or I had to be at a client site. So that turning point actually said, even though it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, she's right. As soon as you say, I can't do this all, I need to find somebody else, you'll know. You'll understand.
Okay, here's I can't forget about this gentleman that gave me the written comment, then I'll pass it on to you ladies right here in front of me. Please talk about a dream client other than one with unlimited budget. What client characteristics help you be most efficient and successful?
Whoa.
So it's interesting. My first client out was my dream client, and it was the way that it came to be is probably why they are my dream client. I attended an ISPI meeting because I wanted to introduce Gabe to another person. And it happened that they already knew each other, so I wasn't brokering a relationship. But while I was there, a graduate of the program hands me a card and says, another graduate of our program is looking for some ISD support, and they need somebody tomorrow. So don't wait, tonight, if you want to send out the email, do it, right? And so I did, and the reason why they are my best client or dream client is because not only was there the ISPI connection, but there was a UMBC connection. So there was alignment of skills and values. And so when I came in, I didn't have to educate them on what I was able to do. They were so excited. And as soon as I started working, I could tell that there was a match, because you can tell. I always know it's a good sign when people say, oh, I'm so happy you're here. I am so happy you're here, right? Because folks have either been overwhelmed on the inside doing the work, and they're so happy that they didn't see the end in sight, so they're happy there's somebody else that can come and help, right? And so it's alignment of skills and alignment of culture, right? So when you get in and folks understand what you do, and you're not spending a lot of time trying to explain what it is that you need to do, for me, that's when you can do your best work. And then you also have there were many people that were doing it, so it wasn't something like I felt like I was alone, and then if I got stuck, I could ask somebody, so I knew the quality of the deliverable was going to be higher.
So there are several clients that we have from the day we started the company, and that's 26 years. We worked with OPM, we worked with FEMA. And what is it that has led us to, we've done over 400 projects for FEMA alone, about 8,000 projects for OPM. It's no joke. I mean, that's a long relationship and a trusting relationship. So first thing is, as I mentioned to you, for example, at FEMA, I spent so much time developing their enterprise learning strategy, then training them, and they learned to trust me, that she's going to get even there were bumps on the road, because this is, in 1989, at first, they didn't trust their leaders about this whole distance learning business, that this lady's coming, she's going to replace us with computers, and then we'll all lose our jobs. Those people are still there, by the way. And and I had to work very hard to earn their trust, train them, and so on and so forth. And once I earned their trust, and I did a great job for them, they won lots of awards for their projects. Everybody's feeling good, looking good. Who's getting the work? I was getting the work. I was always on campus. They knew me. They trusted me. To this day, I do not ask them for work. I walk there, and I go and have lunch with them and say, hey, can you do this for us? Can you do this for us? So it is really, those are the dream. And dream clients doesn't mean that there won't be bumps in the road. You work those out because you've developed a relationship, a strong partnership, and they trust that you can get the job done, and you're going to put yourself out there for them. That is what makes a good customer. Besides the fact, it's a given that you have the skill sets and you have all that. But it's really, to Gabe's point, people work with people they trust and like. Who wants to be with somebody who's rude? We had one project manager, she was so rude to us. I said, man, what does she do to our customers? And we hate firing people, but we hoped that she would leave, and thank goodness she left, because the customer is so happy, we are so happy, it's a happy customer again. So that's really important.
Dream client, right? So I'll just tell you one answer. Maybe this will relate to some of you. You asked a question about mixer. I kind of mix it with that. So one time we had a company out of the Midwest, happened to have a client in our neighborhood, like in South Georgia. So we were just doing a sub work to them for a long time. And so I said, listen, since, I kind of presented this to our business development person and said, since this is in our backyard, we love to do the whole work for you, on your behalf. So, I lived in Jacksonville, Florida. This was in Savannah. So my whole entire team went up to Savannah. We didn't have an ICAT name T-shirt on it. We went with their T-shirt on. So this is a big sugar factory. There were some safety violations, and we had to go do analysis. So, very unsafe environment and heavy shoes and the whole bit. So I kind of was matched with this guy. And I was supposed to be with him for 4 hours. And the guy wouldn't want to talk to me. And I was in trouble, so I can't get out. Well, so I said, I can't give you an answer. So it's I was supposed to do analysis on his work. And he said, the next thing you guys do is, you analyze my job, I'll be out of a job, so I'm not going to tell you nothing. So we just sat there. I said, we just kind of started chatting. Where were you yesterday? I said, at church. Oh, what did you learn? Something from Proverbs. Really? Same thing. So next thing, we're kind of warming up to each other, because we're talking about the Bible, what we were yesterday, because I was at church yesterday, so was he. So all of a sudden, we thought and talked. And so we had the best 4 hours together. In the end, we had a picture together. So I had to kind of laugh. That's just kind of like to kind of get you a little excited about the story. But for 9 months, the company out of Kansas just sent us a check. And that company where we subbed for them, they didn't know we are a different company. We finished the work. Every month they paid us, and we got the job, and we were out of there. I call that a dream company. That lady who owned the business did not have to leave Kansas, and we showed up and did the work in her name. So I consider that a very successful project.
You have a question in front here?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm currently in the professional speaking, training, life coaching, executive coaching fields, and I'm very much interested in getting into consulting a lot more. But initially, I'm interested in knowing what kinds of resources, what sort of guidance do you have to share that would help us with the client contracting side of the business before getting started? And sort of the second part of that is, how does a consultant avoid getting taken advantage of by the client? Maybe, something is changing once you've gotten the work, and it's sort of the road just keeps bending in a way that maybe is taking you way beyond what you'd committed to in the first place. So sort of a two-part question. What resources do you suggest, what guidance do you have to help us get the client side of contracting right before sort of getting into the consulting?
Can I begin with the wrong answer here? And the others will going to fill in the technical. I'll just give you the country boy answer. I believe in a handshake and a trust. So this is just me now. Take advantage of me. I'll do anything. I'll work for free. That's the way I would begin. And just kind of make that customer happy. And then that's kind of, there is a side of me that likes to do that and has done that many times. And then there are times when the contracting has to be in place. But I would say, I remember when I started out, there were a couple of guys who had a contract, with the city of Jacksonville. And I worked for free. I was more excited about the work than they were. They were making all the money. I was making zero money. I mean, all the stuff Stu talked about, being paid. I had a day job, and this was just something close to my passion. I did it for them. They were excited about it. They didn't pay me. I had the joy. And I didn't think of it as being taken advantage of. The next year, they paid me. In a few years, I had that same contract. At the time, I did not look at things that way. I didn't think I would take over. It just worked that way. So it's just within my DNA. If you ask me to help you out, I'll help you out. And so that's the incorrect answer, and my colleagues will fill in with the correct answer.
Well, yeah.
So there are two sides to this coin. One is, it depends on how formal your relationships are. If you're working with the government, I can tell you cannot start without a contract. So, period. Government also has a rule where you can't give them anything for free, all of that good stuff. So you have to learn, if you're going to work with the government, then there's a contracting side to the government. If you're going to work with large companies like PepsiCo, Marriott, whoever, Hertz, although they also have contracts, formal contracts, and so on and so forth. So there are two sides to this. If you're working for a small company, and the handshakes do work. Now, just like Gabe, when I mentioned to you my first client was FEMA, Trust me, they didn't pay me enough money to do that job. But I did it for a whole year because I was passionate. I believed in their mission, and I had fun doing it. And they had fun working with me. So and the payoff was that 26 years later, we're still working together. So I think one of the mistakes a lot of people are making recently, who are new, and I'm noticing that the pattern is changing, is that don't nickel and dime anybody. Even in my company, the scope changes. Unless they tell us to go to Mars on a new ship, we don't go back to the customer. We just, this is a rule in our company. If we committed to this, we're going to do it, unless they really, really change, go 180 degrees, and we absolutely can't do it. So don't nickel and dime the customer. Nobody likes anybody. Just like if you had a plumber or an electrician come, oh, I put a light bulb, and then I put another one, now I need 10 cents more, you're not going to like that. So always put yourself in their situation, and put yourself out. The rewards are amazing if you are sincere and have fun. They see it. People see it. 9 out of 10 times they will. There'll be one person who may not. Well, God bless them. You don't want to work with them anyway. So I would say that just put yourself out there selflessly. Enjoy what you're doing. And the customers see that.
If I might tag on to, I totally agree with what you're saying there. Make sure the customer doesn't threaten you and say,
Right.
if you don't do this, you're not going to get any more work.
Right.
And, like I say, I have a lot of phrases prepared. Well, if I do it for free, you won't have a company to work for you. Because, we, like you, are a company, regardless of whether even not-for-profit is a company. So you have to be disciplined, disciplined. They will respect you. But if you do an unknown quantity of work for a known quantity of money, the next step is bankruptcy. So they have to understand that. If they don't, we are professionals. Unfortunately, sometimes they think what we do is a soft science. And if you're an engineer or something that's a hard science, like you have an electrician come to the house and you want him to put in something, you say, oh, by the way, in addition to putting the light, could you also install my air conditioning? I mean, you'd laugh. That if they would laugh at you if you said that. But yet people don't hesitate because they think what we do here is really not a profession oftentimes. It's just a support service. So once again, I'm saying be very, very disciplined and also very professional. And after a while, if they don't want to pay you, you don't want them anyway because you use your time to bill somebody.
So I'm going to build on this. So my first, all of my contracts I have at least a statement of work, because there can be lots of misunderstandings. So it's easier, if you take the time to put it on paper, then it saves heartache on the back end. So, and then in general, there are at least two parts. We get really passionate about our work and we get focused on the technical piece, but then the business side is the pricing piece. So make sure that you devote enough time, not just on the technical, which you're really passionate about, because when you're in business, you need to be thinking about the business side as well. So as you're taking your time thinking about the level of effort, and if it's not something that you like doing, work with somebody who can think through that, right? And so then you have to think about whether it's viable. Is the solution you're putting out a viable solution and an affordable one for the client, right? Because a lot of times, it's just, as Dolly said, you're putting yourself in the shoes of the client on both sides. Can they afford it, right? And am I giving them what they need to solve their problem? And so if you're looking at the proposal in that way, regardless of it is, if you're working with the government, they'll tell you what font to put it in. They'll tell you how many pages to have it, so you have very strict guidelines. On the corporate side, it's all based on the relationship and figuring out what the appetite is for how much information, but start with a few core pieces.
So just to wrap that piece up, is no matter how much advice and stories we share with you, unless you're in the situation, you're not going to know what to do, because that is the best teacher, really. You'll know which customer to give extra attention to, which one not to, how to handle it. And if you don't, here's a network. Just reach out to us. People do that all the time. So don't be shy to ask the question, how do I handle this situation? I ask that all the time. I still ask because every day is a new day. Every situation is a new situation.
Dolly, thank you for saying that. I told Greg, Gabe and I talked 3 times today. Sometimes he's asking me questions about something, sometimes I'm asking him questions about a proposal, we're working on one together. So, and it was just trying to figure that out. So that's a really great point, asking people.
We have another question?
Hi, good evening. So we've started to hear some of the value that mentors have contributed to your success, and I was hoping you could talk a little bit about how consultants can seek out mentors and make the most out of those relationships.
Can I take that? So I have an incubator in my company, and I've had that for about 10 years. We are always mentoring other companies, individuals. We took a woman who was selling Hallmark cards. They don't sell anymore. And she said she wanted to be in government contracting. Literally, we mentored her from how to dress in a professional environment, taught her Microsoft Office basics, things like that. And so the value of, and she's gone from 0 to 20 million in 24 months. We did the proposals, we trained her in every aspect of the business. And that's what we do. We have another mentee right now, another woman-owned small business. We don't just mentor small businesses, but I never had a mentor. And I came from another country. I'm sure you had a similar situation, probably. And so I couldn't even understand the accent. I spoke English very well, British English, but I couldn't understand what the Americans said to me. So, so there was a minor communication gap there, so you can imagine how many challenges I had to face. So, I did not have a mentor, but what I did was I made a lot of friends in ISPI and ATD now, but ASTD at the time, and I served on the board. I constantly asked questions. I constantly, and I learned a lot through observation. So somebody wouldn't, because I had this fancy degree, and everybody was thinking of distance learning those days, which was great because I had a value proposition. So people would take me to talk to their clients and so on and so forth. And I would observe these master marketers and what they were saying and how they were saying and how they were executing. So through observation, I learned a lot. But I think it's valuable, absolutely valuable to have not just one mentor, but several different mentors. Somebody is better at business, somebody is better at business development, somebody is better at instructional design or handling customers. So, it's good to develop that network, absolutely.
One thing I would add is, someone doesn't have to have a label of a mentor to mentor. So, I talk to at a restaurant, I'm at a restaurant, the waitress is saying something to me, I got my answer. It may be, so there is something I call impartation. There are times when people kind of sit you down and tell you what to do. There are sometimes you kind of pick up the vibes, people are talking to one another. Maybe I need to do that, whatever. So I have so many mentors, and then I mentor. So I'm kind of one of those hand stretches, you are mentoring others and you are also being mentored. So, it doesn't have to be formal. It's just, I'll close this by saying, I have a walking buddy, a gentleman who has, different business. So, when he's not working, I'm not working, we just walk on a lake and talk about, we have nothing in common professionally, but we just talk, to each other about, family and other things. And next thing, we all feel like, we got nurtured. So it's all part of the, getting that mentoring in a sense. So you are getting one, I know. Thank you.
We have another question from the side over here?
No, I think they've covered it, very well.
Well, there's somebody at the back.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah. Well, there he is.
So my question is, I consider myself an internal consultant. I'm a director of a simulation lab, and I have lots of different courses that I help design the instruction of the courses. And so we've been doing this now for about 3 years and growing. I'm at the point where I feel like I need to look at all of the courses and how we have integrated the simulation throughout the curriculum. And so I'm thinking from your perspective, how do you start to think about evaluating your work that you're in the midst of? And I think about the ADDIE approach, and I think about these different things, and I start to get overwhelmed. So basically the question is, how do you do for yourself
what you are going into other companies and doing for them and kind of be objective about it.
May I just jump on this one? One of the first projects I did, when I told you about we hired Dave Duckworth, and his wife was happy. That project was on peer review. So we were hired by an agency, human services agency, and we're teaching them how to do peer review. So that may be just a thought that crossed my mind. So having just people within the organization given some criteria to evaluate may be a way to just get that done. Because it's kind of hard to kind of evaluate yourself. That's why we need a mirror. That's why we need a spouse and friends. And so, hey, peer review.
For me, as a performance consultant, it's often hard to get the feedback. It comes after, you're working with the client, and I always ask the question at the beginning of the relationship, if you had a magic wand and could have 3 wishes, what would be the outcome of this? And so I'm looking at my level of effort in supporting the work and seeing if it's achieving what they said their 3 wishes were, right? And so it often comes after the fact. Like the dream client that I talked about earlier, they will come and find you and say, oh my gosh, can I tell you a story? The work that we did produced this, 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 and this, right? And so the evaluation piece comes afterwards, but my guiding light is if I'm helping them to achieve the things that they say that are most important to them, irrespective of what my process may be.
I was leading a project for a very big corporation, and it had to do with leadership and management. They had not, and this was in 2014, they had not reviewed or updated the curriculum since 1986. So the first thing we had to do is make sure they weren't emotional about the fact that they were, we were going to have to look at it objectively. Not say, oh, we've been teaching this for all this time. How can you change anything? So the client's perception to begin with is we need to upgrade it, but it won't be more than 10%. When we finished looking at it honestly by evaluating it with regard to what's happened in the last 29 years, it ended up being the reverse. It was 10% left, which was basically the history of this company that was part of the leadership, and the rest of it was totally gutted to respond to their needs. So to answer the question, really don't be emotional, be factual, and have, as you were saying, have a structure against which you're bouncing it rather than personal opinion, because everybody starts to get concerned when they lose ownership, and they got to keep their eye on the ball, and what it is to improve their staff.
We have about 10 minutes left before we wrap up. What I want to ask is a couple of things. What are the trends you see emerging in your field today? And how do you stay current in your field? There's a lot that's going on. You're busy with your clients, your marketing, your business. How do you stay current in what's happening?
So I basically get up at 4:30 in the morning, and I get about 20 different feeds. So in my business, I have to stay current not only on the trends in talent management and learning, but also on the trends that are impacting the government, because we are primarily a government contractor. And there's a lot, sea changes happening in the government as well. So I read all these feeds. I speak at conferences, I attend conferences, I invite Greg to come and educate my customers. He did that. We invited thought leaders. We also host the ATD Community of Practice for Leadership Development. We invite a lot of thought leaders, and we have World Cafe kind of sessions. So that's how we are keeping, I know that I'm keeping myself current, but it is my responsibility to keep the company current as well. So we have, a lot of our people serve on boards of different professional development organizations, speak at conferences, but internally we have a wiki, we have blogs, and we also have communities of practice. So for programmers, we have ISD for others, and then we have Demo of the Month, where people showcase their projects and what they did and how they embrace trends and so on and so forth. We also are rewarding and recognizing the efforts of the people. We have a Trailblazer Award, we have Best Practices Award, Innovation Award, and we also do a lot of huddle sessions. We have innovation labs in all 3 sites. So it takes a lot of effort because everybody is working, and it's very difficult to impose something on folks. But it is deliberate, and you have to constantly, every single day, you have to be current, especially with your customers. We're working with utilities. Well, I have to know that the utility just got slapped, $400 million fine. 4 people died, there were gas leaks, whatever. Now, how does that impact not only our business, but how does that impact the customer, and we have to know all that. So it's an investment of your time in addition to what you're doing.
So I teach in the program to stay current, because I know that it keeps my saw sharp. If I'm sharing knowledge with folks, I know that I'm not going to get stale. I think about how much what I had learned in the program has changed in the 5 years that I've been out, and if I were still using the tools that I had from 5 years ago, how stale I would be. And not only do my students keep me current in sharing the challenges that they have in their space, but because colleagues know that I'm teaching the class, they'll send me resources because they know that it's directly linked to the course that I teach. And in addition to teaching, I attend incubator spaces. I go to innovation centers, and I try to stay abreast of what the latest trends are. One of the most recent events that I attended, an EdTech event, folks were talking about hybrid careers and how traditional educational programs are giving you a competence, and many times in order to get the higher paying job, you need a complementary competence that you haven't, if you've gone through a traditional program. Our program is a practitioner's program where you're using it, but if you're not having the opportunity to use that skill, right, you're coming out of a program, but it's usually a complementary skill. In our space, I would say it's the combination of an area of practice that you're interested in, using the ATD competency model, picking 2 or 3 of the competencies, for instance, in that model that you can be, and I use this very directly, the best in the world in those areas, and getting very specialized in those, and then coupling them with the business side. If you're not able to come to the table with both expertise in a domain area and the ability to translate it into a solution, it's going to be very difficult to distinguish yourself.
First of all, a forum such as this is one of the examples of how you keep learning. But if you don't belong to ATD, or it used to be called ASTD, the best thing to do is join as a student. Actually, following on the theme that Dolly talked about, experimenting and learning about a lot of things. This is one profession, or this is one opportunity where being a student doesn't mean 12 and under. So you can get, like ATD, you're basically getting it a little bit less than half price. And don't just restrict yourself to training. There's also the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM. You can join as a student. As long as you're a student in the university and you're taking more than one course. I mean, they have different kind of criteria, but they don't normally get real picky on it. Join the associations, become part of it, because you get 100% of the benefits. You get the magazines, you get the discounts on the conference, you get and even a student rate on a conference in some. Do that. That opens your networking. You get to learn a lot more. You're doing it at half price. Take advantage of it, regardless of what your age is, because this is the one opportunity. But then you also make a choice whether you want to continue. And I've belonged to some organizations for over 25 years, almost 30 years. Just because I got a lot out, but as a student, I didn't get the same from some of them. So that would be the way to do it. Just make sure that to keep current. But now instructional design is not just the only profession. It's called talent management or something broader than that. And so I would probably say 1/3 of my career has been workforce planning, because once you plan the workforce, and I did that, it was actually on the modernization of the Internal Revenue Service. And I got 2 awards for that. One of them from Vice President Gore, which was part of that, reinventing government, and the other was from the commissioner of the IRS. I never thought I would do that. But what happened is we had to figure out what the workforce is going to look like, and then my job was to determine what courses, actually this was an internal project, what courses they've been teaching should be either modified, abandoned because they're not going to do it anymore, or built because they need it for the new modernization. But I had to learn about the human resources side before we could make good decisions about the training side.
In wrapping up here in the next few minutes or so, we'll take one or two more questions. I want to remind you, on the table, there's an evaluation form, and if you fill it out, you will get a gift from us on your way out. Denise, where should they leave them on the table, or should they? Okay. Okay, so if you can work on that, and we'll do like one or two more questions before we wrap up, because we like to start and end on time. At least try to. Got a question in the back here.
I guess coming in, I still don't really know what a consultant does. Still don't know what a clear definition. I guess when I walked in, I would say that I understood that a consultant was a hired gun, a hired gun who was brought in when there was a problem that no one in-house could solve. But what I'm hearing is at least a couple of different kinds of functions that you are doing, that consultants do, such as, it sounds like in some cases, if you work at one company for years and years and years, it sounds like your overflow or your extra capacity. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is how much of your work is dealing with problems that are well-defined, and how much of your work is dealing with problems that are not well-defined. And going back to offshoring, because it may correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the bulk of work that can be offshored is relatively simple, relatively well-defined. So I guess I'm more interested in what cannot be, or what's more ill-defined, what's more challenging, because is this what consulting is to you, or do you see it more as you're a temporary help to offer more capacity to a company, or you're a sort of a compatriot that you offer a function they don't have in-house? Or is it like what I said I thought consultancy was, which is a hired gun to solve a problem that no one inside can solve? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, I think it's all of that. I think first of all, there isn't a common definition saying what a consultant is, any more than there is a common definition of what a parent is. If you really think about it, what is it? You tell me what a parent does. Well, it also depends what your kids are. Some cause you problems and some are wonderful. But as far as, where it's clear or not clear, oftentimes the client will come to you and say, oh, it's clear in my mind, but it really isn't. And one of them was the example I just talked about with the corporation. They already knew. We only need to do 10% change on this curriculum. They decided that. When we led them through the thought process to evaluate what their real outcome was, not just simply the activity they wanted us to engage in, that was our true consultancy. If we had just said, sure, just give us a list of what you want to do, and we'll make some videos, and we'll do some test questions and some lecture notes and books, that's basically arms and legs. And we call that in many cases, just staff augmentation. That's not what you want to do, unless that's what they want you to do. But as a consultant, you want to have some input to it. So it's shaping people's behavior, and that's why I'm using the parent analogy, is that the kids aren't going to tell you what they need. You have to help them. That's the same thing we're doing. We're not babying people. We're not being parents. But it's that go with the flow. So it's all of what you said and more. And my colleagues?
You come in, sometimes it's a capacity issue that, their internal resources could do the work, but they're at capacity because they have a surge. Other times you're brought in because there's a big, hairy problem with lots of problems associated, and people are afraid to touch it on the inside, so they feel safer asking somebody on the outside to come and fix it. And then sometimes it's a combination of things. They're wanting some advice from somebody they consider an expert, but then they're also wanting that person to implement that expertise and perhaps to teach the folks inside so that they can be doing it when you're gone.
Maybe the most simplistic one is in that article I distributed 3 forms of consulting. I refer to one as a hand model, which is they are just needing help. We can call it staff augmentation. They just need resources, and consulting can take that form, and we do that. There is also the expert model, where because of your knowledge, your insight, your advice, you are kind of helping that way. And the third one is just need facilitation, collaboration, working with them. They don't know the answer. We don't know the answer together. We are just kind of like a thought partner. So it could take any of those shapes, as Stu said, based on the need. And I think he said it early on. Sometimes just being an outsider, being an objective party, can also come in that way.
We're at the end of our time, and what I'd like to do is take this opportunity to have you join me in thanking our panelists, Catherine Zaranis, Dr. Stu Weinstein, Dr. Gabe Hamda, and Dali Oberoi. We want to give you a token of our appreciation. There's from UMBC, and you can open them up in front of us. It's not.
Well, what's going to jump
If you
out?
want, if you want to, Gabe, you're going to like this from what you said.
Oh, that's sweet.
Is this a bank bag,
There's cash inside, right?
Wow.
Now, the good thing about this, I think, was I hope you enjoyed it, but we do have it videotaped. We'll have it up on our website. So if you want to revisit things, you can obviously watch the video. You can put the hat on if you want. And I hear it's cool if you leave the sticker on, which I don't really get, but I don't know. So my son tells me. But thank you all so much. You were wonderful. You were a great panel with diverse perspectives and ideas, and you complemented each other very well. So thank you so much. Thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you.